from and all those sorts of things.
Okay, good evening, Robert and the panel. It's Alan Hayes from IGD. I want to come back to something Paul talked about earlier on about London 2012 and 10% of the material used in Beijing. There's no doubt about the fact that London 2012 was a phenomenal success for the whole green construction industry. Prior to London 2012, that whole market and supply chain didn't exist. All the great work that Jonathan Porter did with the One Planet 2012 programme, all the work of the UK Green Building Council, superb. So 10% of the material goes into creating London 2012 from an engineering point of view. But if we then look at adjacent markets, so the whole sort of food and drink and sort of consumption arena there, the best we actually see in that flagship environment is a bit more recycling of beverage and food containers and some nice buildings made of recycled materials. And there's a huge gulf between an engineering construction industry that can revolutionize and reinvent itself to use only 10% of the materials to do a flagship event. And yet on the consumption side, it's as big a consumption fest as anything else. Where will the enlightened leadership come from that will actually start to close that gap? Otherwise, sustainability is completely trashed, and you're right, Paul, it is dead.
Do you want to answer that directly?
Wonderful question. And I wouldn't say that doing what we did was easy. Of course, I wouldn't say that. But it was also tremendously risky. And I won't explain why or how, because it's going to appear on this screen. I'm not sure I really want that, but I'll happily tell you when we're offline from this wretched machine that's Robert's got us in front of. But we went out on a limb, and we effectively went dark for a period where we redesigned our building. And we had to work bloody hard to change people's approach and the way that they wanted to risk manage us into a corner where our solutions were predefined. And we had to fight our way out, and we had to risk everything because the eyes of the world are watching you, and that was exciting, but it was worrying as well. How to transition that thinking is bravery is required. There is an awful lot of greenwash. Take the drinks industry, glass bottles. We've all been told that there's a wonderful reduction in the thickness of glass bottles these days because we're looking after the environment and using less material. And what has happened is profit margins have been protected and more drinks get sold, and actually there's no material reduction at all. When do you get the simple, honest truth, and when do you get the spin to sell the product? I think consumption is certainly in the UK and in the US and in a number of other countries, is a major problem. And it plays maybe back to Deborah's point that the pursuit of wealth, the pursuit of stuff, is deeply unhealthy, and maybe it comes out in something other than an economic indicator. Well, health is linked to an economic indicator, but it's scientifically proven that the pursuit of wealth and the rampant consumption actually leads to serious health problems. And oddly enough, if you want to be healthy and value community, you go and live and work in Japan, because they're at the completely opposite end of the spectrum. And I think we have a health crisis, and I think that may well force people to change their attitudes as children become ever more obese, and it will shake us out of our wretched status quo. So maybe it's something slightly different that might drive us to take a new approach, but it has to be brave and has to be different.
Deborah wants to make a comment. I just want to ask a quick question building on Paul, though, of Douglas, which is how, as a soft drink manufacturer, do you square dealing with this consumption fetish that society seems to have with trying to be enlightened and build a better society?
I think for us it's always been about believing in the mission that you're on, and for us that is a combination of the consumption but also the education around health and sustainability and all those elements that come with consumption. And so the innocent mission of helping people live well and die old is both a combination of consuming great tasting products, but also giving the consumer confidence that those products are sourced sustainably, are sourced ethically, and in terms of the way that we use packaging, we're minimising to as much as we can the impact that our packaging has, and being brave about trying to be the first manufacturers to get to 100% of recycled PET and other things It doesn't mean we don't have an impact, but it's always, you were talking about the journey earlier, we are always on a journey to minimize our footprint, and that, I think, is the leadership position you have to take, is not saying where you are is good enough and then how much can we sell at that position. It's just a continuous journey to drive out the negative elements of any business that exist. And so from my leadership position, it's just that constant battle to minimize the negative and maximize the positive, whether that's materials, the product that's being consumed, or the behaviors inside the organization.
Deborah, you were going to comment?
The only reason I wanted to say something was I was actually a sustainability ambassador for the 2012 Olympics, and that covered the building side and the procurement side. And I think it is worth saying that whenever you've got legacy, actually, Douglas, you kind of covered it off for me, but when you've got legacy, it does take that bit longer, because actually when you start with the greenfield site, you can say, okay, we're going to use this technology. But we are evolving in terms of our sustainability in the food industry and in the drinks industry. But also there are other things at play here. We need to, in the same way I believe that profit needs to be much more widely defined, sustainability does too. And this is whether or not it helps jobs, it sustains jobs, it brings, certainly we're working very hard on getting some of the smaller businesses involved. And so sustainability isn't just about whether or not we're recycling more product, obviously. It's as much about what is it doing for this country and the community as a whole. But it is tough when it takes longer when you've got legacy. You can't just stop. Because actually, it's not sustainable just to stop and chuck everything away.
And that's why I think that sustainability and sustainable as a word is broken, because people mistake it for wearing the Hessian underpants. And going to a triple bottom line model with social, fiscal and environmental balance is much smarter. Heaven only knows what you call it. I suppose triple bottom line would be falling into line. But that's why I think sustainability, the word, is broken, because people immediately rush to the green agenda and you being altruistic about something. But it's far more than that. It's about health and well-being in society and community, as well as making jobs, as well as sorting out the environment. It has to be balanced.
I think actually, I agree with that. And I think one of the issues is the way that we exhaust language. Is a huge issue. Hence, calling my book "PR is Dead" for the same reason you think sustainability is dead. It just needs to stop and be reinvented elsewhere. Gentleman here.
Good evening. My name is Meaden Knight. I'm one of the proud sponsors. Context Group is one of the proud sponsors of the crowd. This has been a lovely love fest of agreement on virtually everything. The only titter of disapproval was Richard Branson, and Robert, you and I probably got hair envy there. So what I want to raise is the silly term of doing the right thing. There is no such thing as doing the right thing. It's a Judeo-Christian construct that we have here and that we're all agreeing with one another. So can we ban the word, you are talking about language, can we ban the word doing the right thing, the phrase? Because it has to be brought down to business. And the Koch brothers, I believe they're doing the right thing about fighting climate change. And they are doing the right thing in their minds. So the more that we perpetuate this idea of doing the right thing, it's a silly cliche and should be banned.
Discuss. Doing the right thing is a silly cliche and should be banned. Deborah.
I don't think so. I think the question is, what do you define as your right thing? And it goes back to something I was saying, that when you look at your organisation, consider it in the context of the global issues that we face, consider the part that it plays, and then decide what its right thing is. Because where I do agree with you, there's no right thing. The things that I care about are different things to the things that people care about within an organisation. And what you've got to do is, if you want to bring your organisation with you, agree what is our right thing. So I don't think you should ban doing the right thing. You just need to not use it as a throw-out coverall. You need to decide, what's my right thing? What is our right thing? And I think it would be a terrible loss if we didn't carry around in our head that thought process of, is this right or not?
Yeah, and building on that, I think that right thing for me is about purpose of an organisation, and lots of different organisations will have different purposes, but ultimately, if you want to make change happen, you've got to have a purpose that like-minded people can be attracted to make that change happen. So my right thing, the right thing that we believe at Innocent, very happy for people to vehemently disagree with whether we're doing the right thing, but the important thing is we believe we are, and therefore we're on a mission to make that happen and make that change happen. And I think you need that sense of belief in it to make real change happen. And that's for me, is the right thing for me is delivering the innocent purpose. That's, I think, how I would phrase it.
Cool.
Over the last few days, we've seen some news pop up from ExxonMobil, and faced with a world that requires consumers to use less fossil fuel and to deal with carbon in a completely different way, shareholders quite rightly challenge ExxonMobil to say, what's your risk register look like for your use for the future of carbon? Pretty good question, don't you think? And they were rather reluctant to let go of that. So a little bit of a battle ensued, and I think it was spilled out 3 or 4 days ago. And they had to admit that they placed this for them as a near negligible risk. And when pushed a little harder, they had to say, we don't believe that the UK or the world will ever get anywhere near its 80% carbon reductions as part of Climate Change Act or Climate Change Responsibility. We don't believe it's going to happen. Therefore, we're not going to place this as a big risk for our organisation, and we'll continue to pursue a fossil fuel intensive strategy for our business. And it felt to me like an abrogation of responsibility in support of a business model that, for me, can't be seen to be the right thing. So I like your question. I wonder what the chief executive of ExxonMobil is thinking the right thing is right now when faced with that very clever, smart question. And what are you going to think about ExxonMobil, having heard what their answer was?
We have 2 questions. One, we have 3. We've got loads of questions. 1, 2, 3. In a minute, I just want to on this right thing point. The CEO of Mozilla was forced to resign last week for having outspoken views, as it was seen, on gay marriage and for funding an anti-gay marriage campaign in 2008. Is an enlightened CEO not entitled to have outspoken views?
I think this goes back to my point, which is within an organisation, you've got to work out what is our right thing. As a CEO, you have, it's like me as a dragon, you know, you have a bigger voice, and therefore you have to carry the weight. You have to be very considered about the challenges that you're going to take up, because if they don't fit with the organisation, with our right thing, provided the organisation has a right thing, because it's not good enough to say, well, actually, that doesn't fit with our organisation. But if the organisation has a good set of beliefs, then I think you need to be very clear what's your personal right thing and what's our right thing. Now, they shouldn't be too far apart, because any CEO working in an organisation he fundamentally agrees with their code of conduct shouldn't be doing it, because that's telling a lie. But I think there are some issues that just cross between the very personal thing and the thing that should be dealt with within the organisation.
So was he right to resign?
Was he right to resign?
We'll come back on that. Right. Well, we'll take 3 questions. Dax has got a question there. We'll go 1, then to the back there, and then to the middle here. And we'll take 3 questions together, and I'll come to you in a minute, if that's okay.
Thank you. Dax Lovegrove, WWF. Is it easier for a consumer brand to get citizen-centric than for a complex business brand like an engineering firm? And I mean, I'd also like to see the word sustainability break. I don't think we're there yet, because when you use words, I mean, I use words, we always use words like smart and innovative. But when you talk about smart, you suddenly get into technology fixes and over-reliance on tech fixes. So I wonder if there is a better word than sustainability?
Is there a better word than sustainability? Question there, yeah.
Yeah, hello there. My name's James Barrett. I'm an engineer with Atkins. You've talked a lot about profit tonight and how profit is not the be-all and end-all, which is great, if you've got lots of money. What about sort of the rest of us, the other 99% that are not going to put our hard-earned bucks into a company that isn't going to give a decent return? Should we be addressing the inequality between the rich and the poor instead of just talking about profit?
Okay, so we've got a question on a better word, sustainability, the inequality between rich and poor, and how do we address that? And gentleman in the middle.
Oh, hi. Kieran Mayers from Sony. The truth is, of course, we're facing an existential threat, and we don't know what to do about it. But we have sustainability professionals, like in this room, who are supposed to help with that. And we're here with the chief executives asking them what they're doing. I'm quite interested to know from those chief executives what support they need from their sustainability professionals to do the right thing, and are they getting it?
So if I understand that last question correctly, you're saying, how do sustainability practitioners find the bravery themselves to dismantle the structure that needs to make the change? Is that what you're saying?
Not exactly. I'm interested in what the chief executives need to help them in this task from the sustainability professionals, and is the community generally able to deliver that or delivering it?
Okay. So we've got three slightly different questions. We'll come back to Dax's question about a better word than sustainability. If anyone's got good suggestions on a better word than sustainability, put them on a piece of paper and maybe bring them up in your round tables and we can capture the information that way. But on those last two questions about the CEO and how he deals with these issues and how he's informed by these issues, and should he or she also be dealing with the issue of inequality, the 99% or 98%?
I'll be a little provocative, seeing there are a few sustainability consultants or sustainability advisors in the room, and say the thing that I could do with is to not have any of you. And for me,
icy silence.
it's always good to know your audience, and I say that for a bit of mischief and a bit of disruption, because who knows quite where things will settle again. But I don't have any of those absolutely focused sustainability consultants that you might recognize, because for me, if your business is pushing solutions that are truly resilient, it pervades the entire organization, and everybody's thinking it, and everybody's believing it, and everybody's stuck into it, and I don't need somebody stuck on the side. And actually having that thing called the sustainability advisor stuck on the side actually harms me, because it's as if it's a nice to have that I could unstick from the side. And you can't take it out of my organization because it's embedded into every single individual.
Douglas?
Yeah, and on that, I would echo it again. It's easy when it was built in from the beginning, but sustainability and ethical approach has been in the business from day one, and therefore there isn't the department that's in charge of it. It is in every single person's objectives to make some change in some way. And that's how we deliver it. We do actually have a few people who focus on it, but their job is not to do stuff. Their job is to make sure that everybody else is doing stuff inside the organisation. So their job is not you're the ones that can deliver projects. They're just making sure that everybody else every single day is got it in the front of their mind, and that's how we do it within the organisation.
Deborah.
I'm actually not a CEO. I don't actually work in any organisation anymore, so it's very difficult for me to say. But I think, Paul, you very eloquently put what I feel about sustainability, which is, I think I said at the beginning, my utopia is the day that we stop talking about it, because it is so fundamental in every decision that is made. So I really can't add to that. But what I will say is, in none of my organisations do we have people we ask questions of, but we don't have anybody designated, with that title, sustainability.
Either it's my eyesight or people are sitting at the back of the room because they don't want to ask questions, but all the questions come from the middle and the front. So who's the furthest back who's got a question? We should go to the back. See? We have got some at the back. Great.
I am Phil Drew from Fishburn. I think Deborah talked about the myopia of measuring by profit, measuring success by profit, which begs the question, what does the enlightened CEO measure success by, if not profit?
But it's doing the right thing, isn't it? Sorry, just a joke. Take this question here as well. This lady here. Is that possible?
Thank you, yes. Roberta Riley, CDP. I would say we've heard quite a lot about the innovative work your businesses are doing within, minimizing the footprint, internally, if you like, designing products. I would suggest that through agents such as PR, businesses have a massive influence on the outside culture, if you like, of society. Is there a boundary to where businesses should be trying to impact consumer behaviour in that sense?
Okay, I take those two questions. They're quite different, and otherwise we might get too distracted. But the impact of what's the limits? What are the good limits? I think is what you're asking, and that's linked to this measuring success by what, if not profit. Paul?
I think it's a really nice question. I think you could probably look at a tripartite paralysis that we have currently. You have policymakers and governments. You have the hoi polloi, the voter, and you have business. And we're locked into this paralysis where business will say, I can't find anybody who's prepared to pay enough money, you've got to change legislation. The government says, well, we can't change legislation because I don't have the mandate yet, you need to vote for me. And the voters say, well, tell me what you're going to do, and then I'll vote for you. And the politicians know that if they tell them the simple, honest truth, they'll never get voted in, so they don't. And you get stuck in this tripartite paralysis. So you sit there and you think, oh my God, that's a bit depressing, isn't it? Who's going to do anything? And again, just to be a little bit mischievous, do you think that the age of politicians as leaders, politicians with a capital P, is over? I worry it is, because our professional politicians are interested in re-election, and that means a short-term game, and nobody ever really looks long-term. But voters need to be told the simple, honest truth, or they need to be taken on a journey to the simple, honest truth so they can make the right decisions. But you can't expect everybody to have all of the answers. So the people, I think, who will really make things change are business. And I think business has to make that move, and there is no boundary to how brave you can be.
Let's take one of those quick snap votes again. Here the choice is, who are the real agents of change? Actually, there are going to be three here, which is business as an agent of change, as the main agent of change, government or politicians as the main agent of change, or neither of the above. So those, a quick show of hands, those who believe that business is genuinely an agent of change, please show your hands. Government? Wow. And neither of the above? So I think there were 4 votes for government. That was about 85%, probably 85% see business as an agent for change, maybe higher.
It's worrying.
It's quite a scary thought. We'll send those that findings to the people writing the manifestos in the run-up to the next election.
Just very quickly, we did have an engineering question, so I thought we can't ignore the only other engineer in the room. But the cost of living conundrum, I think, is a big political issue that may make or break the general election. But if politicians told the truth about how expensive it's really going to get to live, they wouldn't stand a cat and hell's chance of being elected, and it is going to get expensive. And we know that, and they know that, but nobody's telling the simple, honest truth.
Ed, if you want to just capture for the Twitter feed, if you want to capture that vote, and then as many people as possible can retweet it, at least we'll begin to socialise the findings. Deborah, the myopia of measuring success by profit, your phrase, how does the enlightened CEO seek to measure success?
Well, it depends how you define profit. It goes back to the thing I said in the first place. Profit is not just cash. In business, we've adopted it just meaning cash. It actually means anything that you feel is to your advantage or to your benefit. So you measure it by the thing that you want to happen, and that can change. So that can, you can decide when everybody else is laying things off. And actually, businesses do this all the time. They can decide, do you know what? We know we could lay people off, and we could preserve our profit figures, but we're not going to. We're going to try and ride this storm. Now that is doing the thing that I'm talking about. It's saying, actually, we want another outcome of our activities. It's not just going to be driven towards the bottom line. We're going to make different decisions. And those things, so it would be creating jobs. It might be putting something back into the community. But those things change. I couldn't list them for you because they're the things of the moment when unemployment is high. Business often says, we'll ride the storm. We'll take profit, cash profit sacrifice, and our profit will be because we're going to preserve 100 jobs. So it's up to the organisation to know what matters to it and be happy to make a decision saying it's cash versus other benefit. But if an organisation hasn't decided on the benefits, the thing that it calls profit, other than cash, then obviously it's going to single-mindedly and without thought rush back to cash. That's very unimaginative and slightly disappointing.
Douglas, so the question down here also about the parameters. Where do the parameters move to if they move beyond profit? And how do you take large organisations with you?
I think from a profit perspective, I mean, it's hard to build on some pretty sensible comments there. But I think, probably going back to what I said in my introduction, one of the things that impossible to measure, but we think about in Innocent is how, we as a company can act as an agent of change, as a hydraulic effect on the way that other people run their companies, run their personal lives. If we can create small amounts of change in lots of different places, the effect that will have, will be huge and will never be able to be measured or be attributed to us. So it's a sense that by being a leader, whether it's in sustainability, whether it's in the way that you have an employee engagement strategy that attracts great talent to your organization, if more and more companies follow that example, then the impact you're having on society over the long term, and we're sitting back and looking at our rocking chair saying, well, maybe we were part of that change, it will ultimately be far more valuable. And you have to be pretty strong to balance those two things, because ultimately what we're also not is a fruit distribution charity. We have to make money to grow our company. No one else is sitting on the sidelines saying, oh, you're doing a good job, that's nice, here's some more cash to keep your employees employed. So it's finding that balance between investment, growth, profit, but then a wider set of issues.
Question there, and then one here. And if we've got time, I'll come to you. We're running slightly short, and Jim gets anxious if we go past 7:27. So we'll take those two questions, and I've got one final question for the panel.
Hi, Shelley McIver from Global Action Plan. Whilst I agree with much of the sentiment behind simple, honest truth, I wonder whether oversimplification and avoiding how complex and interdependent we all are is how we got ourselves into this mess in the first place. So is enlightenment really simple?
Great question.
Yes, thank you. Cian Duggan from Carbon Credentials. I am one of those sustainability consultants, but also an engineer and hopefully practical with it. My question is one on next steps or next actions or a kind of a nudge type effect. You mentioned you talk to CEOs, they're on a continuum of interested to not interested. If you find one that is interested, what single action would you recommend they take to start the process? I mean, is it something related to what their peers are doing? Is it a data-driven argument? Is it bringing in a consultant to help tell a story or possibilities? What would you suggest as a first step? Thank you.
Douglas, do you want to take the second question first? What's the single action to start the process? And then the second question, which is enlightenment ever simple?
On the first one, find out who's with you in the organization, because I think you'll be incredibly surprised how many people are with you. And I think as a CEO, you can break all the rules and create forums that allow people to put their hand up and say, I'm with you on this and I want to make a change, rather than cascading it through your board, who will then cascade it through the next layer. Find the agents of change inside the organization and break whatever rules anyone has to make that happen. But that has to be the CEO saying, it's safe to stick your hand up here and you're going to get rewarded in some way, probably not with cash profit, to deliver that change alongside me. And that's the first thing that I would say, because in the world today, I think there's a lot of people who would love to find a way to change more inside their organizations. And so use sustainability as one of those vehicles would be my advice.
I think it's very similar. I think you behave it, you speak it, and you recognize it in others. It never ceases to amaze me how powerful behavior, and as long as the words reflect that behavior, how powerful behavior and words can be, and actually words in recognizing other people's engagement. And I think it can be as simple as that, but go back into something we said at the early days. Start something, and people starting business always say, how do I start? Just start. Take the first step, do it, start behaving a certain way, and it's amazing. We're very perceptive. People around you are very perceptive. They will notice the attitude, they will notice your language, and they will notice your behavior, and they will start following.
The pursuit of simple, honest truth. I'm pleased it's resonated with somebody. 18th century American philosopher and doctor, I think, Oliver Wendell Holmes. He said, I wouldn't give a fig for simplicity on this side of complexity, but for simplicity on the other side of complexity, I would give my life. And that's the best description of engineering I've ever heard. And that's how you have to pursue simple, honest truth. And it's not a convenient simplicity, it's the hard-fought simplicity that requires dirty, horrible, chaotic ways in which you can manage horrifically difficult things, and somehow, as a result of the endeavors of a community of people, you get through to the other side of it and you present something back that is really believable and meaningful. But it doesn't mean that the process you went through was easy.
I'm afraid we're out of time. I have to hand back to Jim in 2 minutes, and I've got one last question for the panel. So by all means, tweet using the hashtag #CrowdForum to keep the conversation going. If you want to tweet me directly, I'm @CitizenRobert, and I'll happily continue to curate the conversation among this group and respond. So feel free to do so. So my final question to the panel is this. Who in the corporate community, CEOs, are getting it right? And if so, why? Douglas.
So I think if you look, I mean, it's a fairly well-spoken one about, but you know, the CEO of Unilever is being brave in the sense that he has stepped out and is trying to move a massive organization. And that will take a huge amount of time, but ultimately the best thing that he has done is put his reputation on the line and his business reputation on the line. And I don't think that's an easy challenge he has to change something of that scale, but I give him a huge amount of credit for taking an organization like that and saying, you know, that's one of the key elements of my tenure that on which I will be judged. And for that, I think he gets a lot of credit. You know, however far he moves the organization along that journey, he started the journey, and I think that's a really good thing.
Cool.
I quite like the work that Marks and Spencer's have done over the last few years. And it's largely because of their behavioural change programme that they call Plan A, because there is no Plan B. That's what their PR spin says anyway. And I like the fact that they're embracing their Plan A, which is a much broader approach to smart working across social, fiscal and environmental triple bottom line, to change the way that they work, their supply chain works, but they are in a fiercely competitive environment, so they still have to perform as a business fiscally, but they're brave enough to do something a little different, so I quite like what they've done in the last few years. Deborah.
I'm going to go slightly off centre here and say that somebody I admire very much, Chief Executive, I admire very much, a founder actually, Tim Smith from the Eden Project, who I think kind of accidentally became an enlightened CEO because he was just a maverick. You know, he just started from this. We all start our journeys with a plan ahead of us and a pathway ahead of us, but he kind of started with this. Well, actually, with a China clay pit down in Cornwall. So his approach has been entirely built down to the business needs, and he hasn't followed the traditional routes. And I rather like this very organic way that he works. I'm sure he's very frustrating at times to work with, but who says frustrating isn't good? You know, and he doesn't settle for stuff. And I think that, to me, is an enlightened CEO. It's somebody who hasn't trodden the same old path. They haven't been told what they can't do, and they're certainly not going to be told of the way that they're going to do it. And I think you don't get much more enlightened than that.
Thank you. The Liberal leader, former Liberal leader, David Steele, once famously said, go back to your constituencies and prepare for government. He was probably 20 years early or even longer. So the message, I guess, from this evening is go back to your CEOs and prepare them for enlightenment. And help them take that first step in their journey. It just remains me to thank Douglas, Deborah and Paul for what I think has been a great panel. Thanks to you for your questions. Back to Jim.